I called the Tuesday, March 10, 2020 meeting of the Portsmouth City Council to order, which is a work session. And Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Glover?
Here.
Mrs. Lucas-Burke? Here. Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons? Here. Mayor Rowe?
Here. Dr. Pat? Oh,
Good evening.
before we start, if everybody would turn off their phone, please, the ringer, silence your ringer, and if you feel the need to talk, please go in the lobby. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. Dr. Lauren James, the Portsmouth Public Health Director, will speak with us this evening on the expanding global outbreak of COVID-19 caused by the new coronavirus and the preparation the city as well as VDH across the state is making. The second presentation, the Community Development Block Grant Home Program. The Community Development Block Grant, one of the longest-running programs of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, funds local community development activities with the stated goal of providing affordable housing, anti-poverty programs, and infrastructure development. The CDBG programs are subject to less federal oversight and are largely used at the discretion of the state and local governments and their sub-grantees. Mr. Jeff Crimer, Community Development Manager, will present the FY 2021 Community Block Grant Home Programs. And lastly, the FY 2021 Strategic Budget Initiatives. The last presentation, members of City Council, I will review the FY proposed budget, strategic budget initiatives that were presented to you during the January 13th public work session and covering all of the components of which you have covered over the past 4 weeks. That includes every aspect of the FY 2021 proposed budget. Dr. James.
Dr. James, thank you for being here tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Talking about the popular topic, COVID-19. So February 11th, World Health Organization announced that we had the novel coronavirus, which we now call COVID-19. So coronaviruses are a big family of flu-like viruses, common colds. I'm sure you all have heard of SARS and SARS and MERS, which cause very severe respiratory dysfunction. So it can range, but we have to remember this is still a family of common colds as well. In addition to that, they're spread through coughing, sneezing, and close personal contact. And after exposure, within 2 to 14 days, people present with symptoms. So how contagious is it? So when we think about the flu, the average person who has the flu, they will spread it to maybe 1 or 2 people. And COVID-19, the average person can conceptually spread it to 1.5 to 3 people. And then on the other spectrum, we have like measles. The average person can spread that to 18 people. So with COVID, we're closer to like the flu-like transmission. It's not as contagious as measles, for those of us who remember measles. But that type of thing. So we now know that there are 164 cases, 11 deaths in 19 states, and that's as of March 8th. So these numbers are continuing to grow. So who is affected? The average age of the person who will get COVID is 50 years old. It affects 50% women, 50% males, and what else? Symptoms are fever, dry cough, as well as flu-like symptoms. 80% of these cases are mild, so some people may not even know they have it. And then 13% are severe and 6% are critical. So the highest risk groups are those over the age of 60 and those with comorbidities such as hypertension or diabetes. So a big part of our task as public health is really watching those high-risk groups. So that's why we're looking into supporting our primary care and those long-term care facilities, as well as our hospitals. What is the risk for Virginians at this time? So it is not widely spread within our community at this time. Immediate risk to the general public per the CDC is still low. People who have recently traveled to an affected region or been exposed to someone with COVID, such as a family member or healthcare provider, those are what we are calling the highest risk individuals. So this situation is evolving. Future risks will depend on how well the virus spreads and how sick it makes people. And I'm sure everyone has heard about the 2 confirmed presumed cases within Virginia Beach. So all cases are called presumed until they get that next step of testing by the CDC. But it's still, good to know how those cases were transmitted. And they are saying that those people were on a cruise and those people are now in isolation. So that's what case investigation allows, that early intervention to be done. So these are some ways that the U.S. has already responded. They declared a public health emergency, travel restrictions and airport screenings, surveillance, diagnostic test development, ongoing research for treatment options, vaccine development, information and guidance, and supporting the safe return of Americans overseas who are impacted. So how is VDH, Virginia Department of Health, responding? We are working closely with clinical providers, the CDC, to find, isolate, and diagnose cases early to prevent further transmission. Managing patients who are approved for testing, identifying contacts of those patients, and preparing for contact investigations. And we are monitoring travelers who are returning to Virginia for China for up to 14 days. So locally, we are monitoring any travelers who have been reported to us by the CDC. We have a communicable disease team who is working with medical providers on potentially ill cases and those who meet the CDC criteria for testing. We put together an isolation and quarantine team to prepare in case we did need to use that. Additionally, we're working with our partners. We have the COVID-19 stakeholder group. That's fire, emergency medical services, school, behavioral health, social services, housing authority. Those are the partners we need if we did need to implement more of a process. So now the important part. What can we do to prevent the spread? So basic preventions we use for any flu-like cold illness. We want you to wash your hands for at least 20 seconds after using the restroom, coughing, anything like that. If you're not able to access water and soap, alcohol-based hand sanitizer will do. Avoid touching your face, nose, and mouth. Avoid close contact with those who are ill, and stay home if you are sick. And the CDC at this time is not recommending the public to wear masks to prevent COVID-19. So the take-home messages, which we are doing. An effective response is a community-wide response, which we have demonstrated we are doing through creating our task force and working on our isolation and quarantine team. This is a rapidly evolving situation. Case counts will continue to grow, and we will continue to change our guidance based on those things. We will continue to try to learn more about this virus and promote flu and respiratory infection prevention. And all updates will be communicated on our website as well. All right, well, thank you for your time. Any
questions?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
So if there is, we know that the 2 in Virginia Beach, so all of the hospitals are equipped or able to treat or give some kind of testing to let them know that they're at this stage before it has to be sent off to the CDC?
So you asked if all of the hospitals are equipped for
In
testing.
our area, yes.
So they are equipped, but this is also a newer test. So they have to meet a certain criteria to give that test and then submit it to the CDC. So that's why it's in that presumed phase. So the beginning of them, when anybody is tested, it's in that presumed category, but it has to meet a criteria. Have they had an actual contact, and have they had overseas travel to a level 3 or level 2 area? But yes.
What does
Yes.
the test look for? Does it look for the antigen, or does it look for the virus per se?
That's a good question. I think not 100% is the RNA based. So that is, viruses are making DNA, and so the thought is that if you're there, you're making something to procreate. But do not hold me to it. But that's what I think is testing. But it's a very new test.
Other questions? Thank you again, and thank you for educating
you.
the public and us.
Thank you.
Dr. Patton?
Yes, Mr. Jeff Cromer will come forward and speak with us about the Community Development Block Grant Home Program for FY 2021.
Good evening, Mayor Rowe, Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, City Council members. I'm Jeff Crimer, and I'm going to give you an overview of the 2021 Community Development Block Grant Program budget and the Home Investment Partnership Program budget, going through what has been requested and what we're proposing. Oh, no. Thanks. And this is, the city prepares a 5-year annual action plan and consolidated plan, and this is the second year budget for that 5-year cycle, the 2021 budget is. So HUD has not yet announced the allocation of the CDBG funds for 21, so we did our budget based on what we got this year, which is the 1.572,154. And then we anticipate $44,880 of program income. And then there's prior year money that we still have that's uncommitted at this point of $1,028,938, giving us a total budget of the $2.6 million. And we had total requests for the CDBG of $2.7 million. We're showing here the public services that we're proposing to fund, and they're capped at 15% of the annual allocation, which is the $235,823. All these services are services that are being funded this year. They include the 3 parks and recreation programs, including the senior transportation for about $39,000. Kids meals for about $49,000, and then youth leadership for $13,000. And other services include the Independent Service Center, which works with disabled, doing education and advocacy, and for them for $25,000. And then Portsmouth Area Resource Coalition, or PARC, homeless intake services for $35,000, and for kids also for homeless intake services for $35,000. And then Eggleston runs a homeless employment services that we budgeted for $40,000.
Before you leave, the cap is imposed by the program, not by the city. Is that correct?
Correct. That's a HUD cap. This is our proposed admin budget, which has a cap of 20% of the annual allocation. And so we're proposing for just sort of general admin of $114,430. We're proposing a city parks and recreation master plan, which we budgeted at $100,000. And then the Department of Social Services is the fiscal agent for Portsmouth Homeless Action Consortium, which does the homeless planning and admin, and so we budgeted $100,000 to help them with their planning and admin needs. And then finally, we have other CDBG projects, which are really the bricks and mortar projects. And we've shown proposed funding for parks improvements, which includes improvements of the playground and the fencing at City Park for $1.2 million, replacement of the roof at the neighborhood facility for $650,000. And then the Wesley Community Center has requested money, and we've proposed budgeting them at $85,000. And they want to, and I'm not sure what we'll actually end up doing there, but they're proposing at this time the roof, the gutters, the overhangs, lighting, and signs. And then Eggleston, which also runs a laundry service that employs primarily disabled people, they requested money, and we've proposed to buy laundry equipment. They want to buy like a commercial grade washer for $160,718. This is the home entitlement, and again, it's based on this year's allocation of $421,788. And we had requests of $438,268. And so we're proposing funding for kids to administer tenant-based rental assistance for $150,000. And then the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission will be working again, doing down payment and closing assistance for $208,519. And then we have to set aside money for a community housing development organization of 15%. And so that's what that final category of $63,268 is. We still don't have a CHOTO here. So that may change, but I'm not sure at this point.
Any likely candidates for that?
Well, so a few years ago, actually, we worked with Habitat of Southampton Roads, and they had capacity problems, and so they went away and have been working on that. And they called me maybe about a month ago, and we met, and so they seem to have progressed, and so I think they're interested, but we just haven't gotten to a place yet where they've actually applied for anything, and so hopefully we'll be able to work with them. They've been working now in Chesapeake and Suffolk, and I've talked to people there. And
As a CHOTO?
yes, and I think they're happy with, that they've addressed some of the issues that they had with the organization. And so, like I said, it's possible we'll be able to do something with them this year. But yes.
Habitat for Humanity?
Yes, the Southampton Roads. It's a local chapter.
Lisa?
Yeah, has any community action agencies like Stop Inc. Inquired about this?
So they probably don't, the way STOP is set up at this point, they probably wouldn't qualify as a CHOTO. A CHOTO is different than a CDC in terms of how they're structured and their mission and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, STOP would probably have to do some reorganization.
Elizabeth?
So if we haven't had any CHOTOs in a couple of years, does that money keep rolling over, or can we use it for something else?
We can't use it for anything but a CHOTO project. It has to, HUD has the requirement that at least 15% of the annual allocation has to be set aside for a certified CHOTO, and so we can't put it anywhere else, unfortunately.
So is it sitting there from
It's
last
sitting there
year?
right now, yes. Yes.
So you might have 120.
Yeah, there is more than that 63.
Bill?
I would think that we need to put the money for use, certainly. I think there's a large need in our community.
Yeah, there is a need. It's just sort of the conundrum is we need to have it used by a certified CHOTO, and we can't move it to one of these other activities. And
Habitat for Humanity is a pretty well-known organization.
yeah, but the local chapter, you're right, and the local chapter, they just had a lot of capacity issues. They just didn't have staffing. They had cash flow problems, and they just didn't do a very good job.
It still exists?
Yeah, they still exist, and they, like I said, they reorganized, they slimmed themselves down. I met with the director, and he's told me these things. They've gotten a better handle on things because they had several years there. Many years there was a director there for a long time who left, and in that interim period there was a lot of turnover and several directors, and it just they just had a lot of problems with their
How's
capacity.
Chesapeake's experience with them?
They said that they did a house with them recently, and they were happy, with the outcome of it. And so.
Yes, I was going to remind council that, let's just say 20 years ago, there were CHOTOs everywhere. It was very, very much a part of community groups following the federal guidelines that would require them to be able to use this money. This money cannot be used by the city for a project. The city has to partner with the CHOTO. one of our last chotos that had several entities was Maury Cook's group, and they did housing, they did renovations, they did so many things. And so since that time, the city has not had a standing choto. When I came in 5 years ago, we were trying to do a little with Norfolk, but I don't know if it's because of the requirements that are placed upon those who receive this money and all of what they have to do and follow in order to use it. But across the country, it's kind of lost its luster of groups outside of the city, following, applying, becoming certified to be a choto, and then applying through this program to represent the city and use that money. So we have not used it because we have not found a choto. I think when I came in 2017, we were trying to do something with the choto in Norfolk. And we probably did. Did we do any?
Not anything with the one in Norfolk, but we worked with Habitat till I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And, you know,
Shannon, you asked for it before.
Yeah, with the chotos, it's my understanding there's, as Dr. Patton said, there's a strict accountability piece with the chotos. So if you don't meet those standards and you don't meet the certification, then you cannot partner with those types of individuals.
Right, right.
Other questions, comments?
And that's the schedule then for the
Go back
finishing
to-
night.
Any other questions on the total? I have one. On our homeless situation, have we worked through the PHAC issues?
Well, you know, so.
Slide, page 5. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, this year we also granted in this current year 100,000. It's not a grant. We worked with DSS, and they've hired the planning council. They have the planning council under contract to help them do planning and admin. For many years, Park was the fiscal agent, so the city's now become the fiscal agent, and is the co-chair of PHAC, and took on then the planning council under contract to help them. And you know, so I've talked to Ms. Littlehill about it, and she's real happy with the progress that they've achieved this year working with the planning council in terms of organizing and applying for money and just getting things just better situated for the organization.
Shannon?
The other thing I wanted to ask, as it relates to Portsmouth Volunteers for the Homeless, does any CDBG money go toward that effort, or is that a different line item through our budget?
Yeah, they haven't applied for CDBG, and I think they might get some money through the Civic.
It's a different line.
Right.
Get about
Yeah,
25,000 from the city.
Right.
Bill?
On the Chodo issue, I would like to see a report back. I think if we're going to keep accruing the money, and obviously I don't think the needs are going away, there's got to be some resolution to it as far as finding an organization that does the right things to get that money out where the rubber meets the road and some needs are taken care of.
Right.
If everybody's in agreement.
Oh, yeah. But as we've discussed, I think the requirements are pretty stiff, because if you don't meet the requirements, you have to pay the money back.
That's right.
And that was an issue.
Yeah,
With
I
the
recall
last
that.
one.
Yeah.
But other cities are somehow doing it. For us not to do it, I'm sure we can find a reputable organization with accountability.
Well, let's have
We'll report back.
What are the next steps again? Can we put that calendar back up?
since we'll do the public hearing, we walked this with the city budget, so we'll do the
Right.
public hearings on April 21 and 28, with the adoption on May 12th, and then it gets submitted to HUD. Presuming that HUD announces the allocation by that date, if they don't, we have to wait until they actually announce the allocation. But the plan is to submit on May 15th to start the program year on July 1.
So that we're thinking about this in the near term, let's have that report back at the next council meeting.
On the Jodo,
On the Jodo.
Jodo. Okay. That would be the
Is that
24th.
agreeable with everybody?
Absolutely.
You want this?
Are we good?
We're good.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Farmer. I was getting ready to say, what is this? Okay. This is, Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council. Since September of 2019 to the present, the city's budgeting staff and departments have been developing the FY 2021 budget. The staff has been guided by the City Council's vision and your 4 big things, along with citizens' input in shaping the proposed strategic initiatives that serve as beacons for the preparation of the FY 2021 budget. In setting the 3 strategic initiatives presented during the January 13th public work session, it has created a collective driving force that it has inspired staff to move with expediency in making sure we hear the collective voices of both the City Council, the citizens, and received input from both. I will review with you again, and I presented this on January the 13th, the strategic initiatives, as this is the last public work session before I present the proposed FY 2021 budget. As you are aware, for the past 5 years, we have been guided by a budget mantra, which is review, reflect, refocus, restore, and reimagine. As we have worked through this budget, as looking at the mantra for review, we have taken a full assessment and examination of all aspects of the municipal budget with the possibility or intention of instituting change where necessary. Looking at the mantra reflect, we have been reflecting deeply and carefully about cost-effective plans with careful consideration for all budget requests and recommendations. We have met with 42 entities that actually are a part of the city's budget. In Refocus, we have focused our attention on resources, on doing things differently, on setting priorities in city programs, and using different approaches in the delivery of services. And under Reimagine, we have formed a mental image of something which is not present in our city, but rethinking it and believing in it, fantasizing about it, and we will become what we imagine. I now will go through the 3 strategic initiative areas, and in those areas, you will see the presentations that have come before you as it speaks to parts of the budget. From municipal facilities, a very detailed presentation at the City Council retreat. The Crawford Gateway revitalization, we came back to you on January the 27th. All of these were doing the public work sessions or at a retreat. We had an in-depth discussion on City Park. We returned to you through our city engineer and sharing with you the things that we would put in place and start right now in the 2020 budget. The stormwater management systems were presented to you on February the 10th. Stormwater Park, February 10th, public work session. Mr. Wright presented both of those. The flood sensor monitors, we talked about those during the retreat. The flood protection programs and construction practices were a part of the February 24th, not retreat, but public work session. That's an error. Livable. When we think about livable, we draw from our rich history to promote healthy individuals, local economies, regional collaboration, and vibrant neighborhoods with strong identities. These are the presentations that have been made and put before you with documents pertaining to the strategic initiative Livable. Smart City presentation by Daniel Jones on February the 8th, which we also included the fiber infrastructure construction discussion. The housing strategy was presented to you on February the 25th. Those consultants have met with some of you. They will be coming back over the next months as they continue to develop the strategy. Parks and Recreation Master Plan was presented at the February 24th Public Works session, and Mr. Wright came back to tell you the process of where we're now going out with RFP to look for those who will put in proposals, and that will be a process of meeting with the public, meeting with council, and getting input on exactly what we envision as it pertains to Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The complete street bike and pedestrian system shared mobility is presented to you over the months, and the team continues to work on that. We went out for the RFP, but I don't know what has happened, but we're still working. No, I'm going to say this. What has been so fashionable with these little bikes, not bikes, but scooters, the interest across the country has pretty much died down. We were thinking we would get quite a few proposals, but we got one, and we're still working on it. The talent acquisition and retention, Mrs. Gooden presented to you at the retreat and doing a February 24th public work session. The Hampton Roads Transit Ferry Landing, we had HRT representatives here to present, and the multi-purpose rail to trail was presented on February the 11th and shared with you the ongoing efforts. And we are always working with our regional transportation systems planning and development. The last, sustainable. We embrace the future and respond positively to emerging opportunities to care for the people and places we love by balancing historical preservation with thoughtful reinvestment and redevelopment. These are the areas of which we have and will be coming to you. Mrs. Tremere presented at the retreat an in-depth presentation on sewer and water infrastructure, and we will have the consultants to come and make a presentation next gen on April the 28th at a public work session. You adopted the school funding formula on February 10th, and you had your joint City Council Portsmouth Public Schools board meeting. And we're always collaborating with the military and other state and federal partners, and then adhering to all regulatory reforms. Since we last met, we had began our annual meeting again with the Department of Transportation, where a team comes over because it's getting ready to get warm, and we're already having citizens that are calling to our attention the interstates, the on-ramps across the city are littered, and it is the responsibility of the state to clean their ramps. And so we have a schedule that they have provided for us in their mowing and a schedule for addressing the ramps. And I think one positive thing is that the gentleman who's responsible for that is a citizen of Portsmouth that works for the state. So we were real pleased. Right, we were real pleased. In closing, as we continue building the futuristic technological infrastructure in becoming a smart city, the presentation of the proposed FY 2021 budget on March 23rd, 2020 has required us to be smart, innovative, and wise. We have prioritized and presented to you every component of the 3 strategic initiatives that are framing the proposed FY 2021 budget. The budget team has been methodical as it relates to the process and efficacy, with the intent to achieve the desired outcomes, to present a balanced budget that is proposed for the FY 2021 City Council's consideration, which will be presented on March 23rd, 2020 at 5 p.m. Earlier, Mr. Glover came in and he indicated, I like the process which you used last year, and I hope you continue where after you present the budget, we can come in and go through and talk and whatever in depth. And I said to Mr. Glover, I said, Mr. Glover, this will be our 5th year, and we will again start that we will start it right after the 24th. We'll schedule you 2 and 2s, and as I said, as many times as you need to come back to understand the budget. That has been the process, and it will remain in place. Are there any questions, members of council?
Dr. Pat?
I have 2, totally unrelated to each other.
Okay.
When you were talking about the scooters
Yeah.
and the fact that
They're not popular.
having them chomping at the bit to come do that doesn't hurt my feelings.
Okay.
But I did see on the news last night that the Pace bicycles determined they weren't making enough money in Norfolk and were going to leave Norfolk. And somehow bicycles seems like a really nice fit for our downtown because of the size of it. So I just bring that up as maybe that's something we might look at.
Consider. Okay.
The other thing, more budget related, I was thinking last night after we left and we're talking about the meal tax. I don't think it really occurred to me sitting here that the 1% on the meal tax brings, and tell me if I've got this right, about $1.3 million.
It's estimated at that or more.
Versus a penny on the real estate tax, it only brings 770.
777.
And so if we did that, if we came back with the 1%, that's factored into the school funding formula. So
Already.
the school would automatically get
30%.
30.23, whatever. So, so that's, in round numbers, about $390,000, $400,000 of that. That leaves about $900,000 for the city general fund. But if we did that, could we take, like, say, maybe 25% of that 900, which comes out to about, this is napkin math here, about $225,000 or so, maybe a little more, to tourism and promotion and advertising for our restaurants and our downtown and our shops and our, I don't care if it's a promotion that says you get a $5 off a tire if you buy it in Midtown because you got a concert ticket from the pavilion. Something to get people back on the street. I haven't talked to any of y'all about that. It's just one of those 3 a.m. thoughts. I didn't like it as a considered for
I could sit down.
for education because I didn't think it made sense. But just a thought.
Bill?
It's a good thought, but I'm still opposed to it because it's still putting a tax on a specific industry. You know, if we need to raise that amount of revenue, we need to do it across the board, not singling out the restaurant industry.
But at least it is a user tax.
You know, it's a user tax that can harm the restaurateurs in our city that are already under stress from tunnel tolls. You know, and competition. The restaurant business is fierce competition. And it also filters down to the wait staff in those restaurants. as far as gratuity is concerned. So it's a good thought, but the restaurant owners in our city don't need that additional burden.
When we discussed last year, we had some presentation of information of some other localities here in Virginia. I think it would be good, just as we go discussing this going forward, to get the information from those localities and basically what the effect was or what it wasn't on those restaurants. It'd be nice to have that presentation for all of us to hear it again.
How those localities don't have tolls to contend with. Our situation, I think, is pretty dire.
And I would also add, any strategy that we have, that we attempt to adopt or put in place for this, well, we need to include the restaurants in the discussion.
Absolutely.
I keep hearing this talk, and I like the positivity of we're looking at options, but we've got to talk to the people that are doing the work every day and bring them to the table as well. So that's what I'm advocating for, because until we get buy-in that way, I don't think it works the way we need it to work.
This is all a good discussion. Last year, I was on the negative side because we didn't have enough time to bring everybody in, particularly the restaurants. This year, we're starting the conversation earlier. I think we get hung up by saying this is a tax on the restaurant. It's not. It's a tax on the people who eat at the restaurant. And the beauty of this tax is that we have a large percentage of people who eat at our restaurants that don't live in Portsmouth. And you can see that. You can do some shoe leather survey by just going in and seeing the people from Suffolk and Chesapeake and Norfolk there. I'm intrigued by the notion of putting, and I think 25% would be low. I think that where we underperform is in our marketing, particularly the beautiful assets that we have here in Portsmouth. It's been a long goal to get more people from tourism. It's not just somebody from Canada or from New Jersey coming.
Right.
It's somebody within the region coming to Portsmouth. And so I think that, and restaurants can be competitive in different ways too. Look at the cost of a glass of tea. If it's $2.50, think about how much it costs to make that tea. There's a nice little tidy margin in that. So they have ways that they can be competitive.
I agree with Shannon. I think before we decide how we're going to spend their money for them, and you say it's not a tax, that money is not their money, but I think if you'll go downstairs and check, we have a lot of restaurants that are behind on forwarding the meal tax.
I don't disagree, but they're...
And I think we would be remiss not including the restaurants in this conversation.
I don't think anybody is saying that. In fact, that was the drum up beat last year. So we're all saying the same thing, Bill. But I think it's a misnomer to say it's a tax on the restaurant. They're acting as a trustee of the funds. The funds are paid just like any employer acts as a trustee for the withholding taxes. So it's no different from any other tax that's collected at the point of sale. Any of our retail businesses act as the trustee. But I think that the conversation needs to be enlarged. I think we set a course last night of not slamming the door on this. You came up with a
No,
thought.
I haven't thought about it.
Yeah. So,
And I've been thinking about it for a year, and we were just looking for a way to fill the shortfall for the school budget. But I like the idea of putting some towards the market, and I thought that would how it would all work anyway. And I didn't know if we had time to do a public hearing where we would invite the business restaurateurs in, to have the conversation and then have some citizens to weigh in on it too and see the presentation, because I don't think everyone had the privilege of seeing the one that we saw from Henrico County, where they went in and they were all up in arms about the meal tax, but then they saw how it benefited, and the restaurants didn't suffer one iota, but they appreciated the increase that came out of it. And I think we need to, we're good to grow. We just passed the casino legislation. That's going to be opportunities where, if they build it, they will come, and then when one thing come, and then other people come, and then, we're going to need to be able to monopolize on the opportunities of having additional restaurants in the area and taking advantage of the.
I think we can be naive, and let me say it this way. As the region got together, particularly the members of HRT, to find a source of funding for our regional transportation system, we looked at several funding sources: a grantor tax, which is paid when you sell real estate. It's part of the closing cost. A transient occupancy tax, aka the lodging tax. An Uber tax, Uber Lyft tax. And it would be naive to think that the realtors were not in support of that. They were not. The hotel operators were not in support of it. They were not. And Uber and Lyft were against it. But none of those industries pay the tax. The people that stay at the hotel do. The people who sell property do. And so I think to say, yeah, we want the input from the restaurants, that's a good thing. But let's be clear that input's going to be negative. We don't want this tax. And being a legislator, yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, me too.
I think we still need to have the discussion, but I think we need to be prepared to a good majority of our restaurant owners saying, don't raise the tax. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think because they're already feeling the stress from tunnel tolls, from the pavilion being shut down for a season, and other economic
And I
considerations.
agree, and I said that last night. But
Yeah.
my point is to take part of this money and use it to
Help market it.
advertise these same folks. If we can spend a couple $100,000 advertising our fine restaurants and fun things to do, then we're bringing in more people.
And one of the comments that I've gotten from a restaurant owner downtown, one of the major restaurants, is the need for additional lighting downtown. And this could go into helping solve that problem. Shannon?
I think that there's value to exactly what you're saying, but I go to the restaurants probably about 3 times a week downtown. What I can tell you, what I hear, is that we've eroded the trust in our restaurants. They don't necessarily believe they're on the same team. So when I say that we need to meet with them and we need to build that relationship back so that they will be on the same team, I don't expect that they're all going to agree with the policies we come up with, but we can get buy-in. And I think what I've heard here is I like the idea of if we're asking them to give us something or support us in a way, then we put something out to make it advantageous to the whole to benefit everyone. I don't disagree with that. But too many times in our city, we make decisions and we don't go to the main people that's going to be impacted by it.
Shannon, we've all saying the same thing. And I said that last year. I said
Okay,
it.
well, we need to do what we say we're going to do.
Well, we haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
And, there's a discussion, you raised a question, can we have a public hearing? Why don't we see if we can have the city manager and her team meet with the restaurant owners? Because the public hearing, if we do it our normal way, that's 2 weeks away. Then we're going to be, we don't have enough time to get this worked in. So is there a consensus among council that we ask the city manager to start a conversation with our restaurant owners, not just downtown, because the meals tax applies to everybody.
That's exactly right.
And another thing is the information that we had about Henrico and a couple other places, it might be beneficial to reach out and maybe get some restaurant owners from there to come talk to our restaurant owners, because they lived it. So it wouldn't be bad to get their perspective, because it worked for them.
We have a consensus to direct the city manager to start working on this between now and the next.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
I mean, maybe we end up saying no, but I
Yeah,
like, I
right.
like the concept.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Elizabeth and I had an opportunity, we had dinner together during restaurant week, and it was really busy. I mean, it was successful. I mean, and this is just kind of like a little model of that. You know, if you can get people in and people dining, then they'll come back.
Maybe it's a free ferry token. Maybe
Yeah.
it's you get $5 off if you have your ticket stub from the pavilion
Right.
on a certain night
Right.
or whatever. And we subsidize that, so it's not the restaurant having to subsidize that. I don't know. Mr. Bates is the guru on
All right. Is your direction clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor, this concludes the presentation.
All right, your report backs?
I have no report backs. I did put in your boxes today, in your box, the physical box, not in the box. Okay. I'm sorry, I explained that. Just a update on
Non-virtual.
the work with, which in your CCEB over the last year, we've been updating you on the London Oaks Complex project and our work that we are doing through permits and inspection and everything that they have been asked to do through HUD. And our inspectors now working along at the HUD's request are being done by the complex. And you'll see in that correspondence, everything is going well. There will be no displacement of people. And you will see in there, there's a new London Oaks newsletter that will be produced monthly, and I have the first copy of it behind your attachment.
All right. We come now to city council liaison reports. We'll start on my left.
I've got to do this, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, you have 3 items on the city manager's report tonight. The first one comes from, it's the family partnership meeting and Senate funds comes through the Department of Social Services. It will be an adoption of an ordinance accepting funding from the Virginia Department of Social Services in the amount of $3,000 and appropriating said amount in the FY 2020 Social Services Fund for Family Partnership Meeting Incentive Program. The second comes as acquisition of 387 Quebec Street comes through Mr. Robert A. Baldwin, Deputy City Manager and Director of Planning. It's an adoption of an ordinance accepting title to 387 Quebec Street in the Sugar Hill section of the city from the Economic Development Authority and authorizing the payment of $31,070 from the Stormwater Fund to reimburse EDA for the cost of the acquisition of the property. The third and last is the post-host communities funding, and that's submitted by Mr. Robert D. Moore, Economic Development Director, and it's adoption of a resolution certifying the City of Portsmouth's support for the demolition and revitalization of the former Cogentrix site, including through acceptance of a Port Host Communities Revitalization Fund grant from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, and further authorizing the execution of the corporate agreement with the Portsmouth Port and Industrial Commission related to the project and the grant. Just to give you a little background, I'd like to call to your attention through the work of Mrs. Sherry Neal and the Portsmouth Legislative Delegation last year. The Virginia General Assembly created the Port Host Communities Revitalization Fund, or re-established it. And under the terms of the fund, the 5 post-host cities, which are Portsmouth, Fort Lauderdale, Newport News, Norfolk, and Richmond, will be able to apply for a grant from an annual pool of $1 million. Since this has been reinstated, this is the first time that in the new funding that the grant money is to be used for the redevelopment of port-related properties to further economic development and employment growth. And this is the demolition of the old Cogentrix. And this funding comes through this grant, and the matching of it will come from the company, which is IRG, through its own expenditures for the demolition. So this is
Any questions?
And they got the full amount they asked for.
yes,
The full $500,000.
Yes, they
Which
did.
is great, especially for a first time.
right, which is very good. That's it.
Any questions? All right, liaisons.
For EDA and PPIC, there are no general monthly meetings this month. Remind you that they are having a joint retreat Thursday, March the 19th at TCC at 8 o'clock in the morning for the day. Under military affairs, working diligently on the Memorial Day Parade, and this year the Grand Marshal will be the commander of the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Captain Torkelson.
Behavior health care, they're having a problem retaining some grant funding because they haven't been able to have a speeded up hiring practice. Is it any way that personnel and them could get together so we wouldn't lose the funding that has to be spent within that particular year?
I'm not aware of what you're speaking of, Mr. Battle. There is a grant that the Department of Social Services had, which is not required for them to apply for, because the grant that they did have required them to overspend the amount to provide the services.
Maybe I didn't.
Yeah, let me get with Ms. Littlehill and I'll get back with you.
Let me try to explain it a little better.
Okay.
They are receiving grants
Lots of them.
that you have to spend the funds within a year's time. If you don't, the money has to go back to the grantor. They're having a problem using all of the money, and they're having to send some monies back because the hiring practice for that time period is not meeting the obligation. You understand
I hear
what I'm
what you're
saying?
saying, yes.
I mean, but you understand what I'm saying,
I'm hearing what you're saying.
but you don't understand.
I can't speak to that to you right now.
I didn't, I should
Yeah,
speak.
but
but
I
I'm just saying, does this exist?
Okay.
Is it any way that we can alleviate that problem? That's all.
I would look into it as I see it to see exactly what you're speaking of with Mrs. Littlehill,
Right,
so that
but-
I can report back.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's what I said.
Elizabeth covered the ADA and PPIC.
We've been talking about my liaison but I do have one concern about the follow-up with the risk management. There's still been some discussion on where we are with that, and we had thought that we would be to a conclusion by then. So is any update that we can get to?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, and Vice Mayor in particular, there have been some questions since I delivered my report to the school board. As a matter of fact, Councilman Glover asked some questions about the report that I provided to the school board members. In all candor, so everybody's aware of what I said to Councilman Glover, I asked Councilman Glover first and foremost to ask for a copy of the report from the school board members, or otherwise I would reach out to them to provide that report, because as I've been trying to do, try to keep these two issues separate. I don't have a problem in terms of presenting that information to you all, but at this point, I have not conveyed a need to the city manager to convey that money out of that risk management fund based on the things and the ordinance involved. But it's what you all want to do in terms of presenting what those issues were. but I have presented those issues to the school board, and I also presented you all a letter that they drafted back requesting some response, but I believe in my email I had suggested, because I knew today was going to be busy, that we could pick that up at your next meeting.
Presentation.
Is that yours?
That's it.
No, I don't have. Shannon?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just wanted to report out basically on the initiative that we are undertaking with the REAL project, the Race, Equity, and Leadership Workshop. It will be held on March the 21st, 2020, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Portsmouth campus of Tidewater Community College. Invitations have gone out to stakeholders to include members of the Poverty Task Force, faith-based leaders, and city staff. In addition, the event will be open to all citizens to attend. Marketing will be sending out communications to everyone, and this will be an opportunity for all of us to increase our knowledge and capacity to eliminate racial disparities, heal racial divisions, and build a more equitable community. Thank you.
We do have a need for a closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
I move to go into closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711, A.7, for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the city, specifically regarding Integrated Management Group, LLC, versus City of Portsmouth, Portsmouth Circuit Court Case Number 19002742, and Michael A. Moore versus City of Portsmouth, Portsmouth Circuit Court Case Numbers 19003403, 19003277, and 1900448811.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? This is a roll call oral vote. Will you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Battle?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Mayor Rowe?
Yes, we're in closed session, and if you're not involved